The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Alrighty then. That seems to have worked. Alright, so let's go to the magic place over here. Alright. So folks who are on the webinar who are not in this room in beautiful Belvedere, New Jersey, if you could you just write in the question bar on your side, the side of your screen in the webinar toolbox to let me know that you can hear me and that you can see my screen. Here's looking at you, Dana and Vivian. If one or both of you could just say that in the question side, I would be much obliged. Everybody else who's here, hi. How's it going? I guess we can start the meeting the way that we usually start meetings, with introductions, so everybody knows who everybody else is. And do we have agendas?
Yes, agendas are here.
I also have a hand up, so let's go down with the agenda.
Did everybody get an agenda?
Yeah. I apologize that my handouts are clearly like they got rained on and then dried a little bit because it was the worst weather I've ever experienced driving out Route 78, and I hit it right as I walked out the office door today.
Did you get one? I have it. Oh no, I need that one.
Thank you, Vivian. That was very kind. I really appreciate it. So we have Vivian. Okie doke. For those of you who are on the call, the thing that we just passed around is a paper copy of the agenda and a paper copy of what's come to be our developed Tri-County Coordinated Assessment. This was something that we had talked about for a long time last year. A number of agencies helped by piloting it with a couple of the folks that they did an intake with, and basically seeing what type of prioritization score the households received. And so I want to emphasize that part of the point of this meeting and the planning around coordinated assessment isn't to just kind of say this is what we're doing and look out below. It's to figure out the best way to go about this together. So if anyone has any substantial suggestions for amendment or change, then that is totally welcome. So before we get into those discussions, though, we said we would start with introductions. Who wants to start with introductions? Oh yeah, move my jump. I'm so sorry. Taking up all the space. Yeah, we'll start over here. Thank you.
Vanessa Doreno, Technical Assistant for the Central Region from HMIS.
Nick Katsanakis from the Sussex County Division of Community and Youth Services.
Donna Michelson, Family Promise, Hardin County.
Sean Busker, Director of Human Services in Warren County.
Director of Human Services, Warren County. Chris Buda, Executive Director, Family Promise, Sussex County.
Leanne Trott, Family Promise, Sussex County.
Candy Brewster, HMIS.
Sarah Sokolowski with the Westcott Homelessness Prevention, covering the counties of Sussex, Morris, and Somerset. HUD supported for Warren, Sussex, and Hunterdon counties.
Laura Richter, Warren County Department of Human Services. Jen Stivers, Community Hope.
Jay Everett, Monarch Housing.
Chris Emerson, Hardin County Human Services. Kathy Doyle, Warren County PATH. Samantha Scott, Warren County PATH. Loretta Marion, Warren County Girls. Courtney Dixon, Warren County PATH.
Bob Frankenfield, Family Promise, Warren.
Maggie Quinn, Family Promise, Warren County.
Groovy. Okay. So what is the first? I need a copy of the agenda. I didn't get one. Sweet. Okay. So here, this is the culmination of some very exciting failures on my part in HMIS for a long time. Oh, sorry. And now we've gotten to a pretty successful pilot place with our FormBuilder, okay? So to kind of give a foundation to our coordinated assessment discussion, in addition to you seeing the paper form of the questions and the different fields that have been recommended by HUD for determining who should be prioritized for permanent housing, we're going to look at what the implication is and one of the ways we could utilize it if we were going to utilize it through our HMIS system. I wanted, if you may remember, those of you who were at the last meeting, I wanted to be able to show both what it would look like to have this form in the services module for our programs and as a potential waiting list functionality. The waiting list functionality has taken longer, even though they've been promoting it. It's taken a little longer to roll out and give that functionality to each user. So I did not set that up, but we're going to look at it in the services module today because honestly, in the back of my mind and in consultation with the folks at HMFA, considering the way that the programs in Tri-County are predominantly set up, everybody has access to the services module. Many of our sheltering programs, who might be the folks that are doing some of these assessments, predominantly use it as a shelter, or supportive only program setup. So it makes sense a little bit more maybe to try it there. So we're going to look at it, workshop it, see how it looks, and so let's try that. Okay, for those of you who are on the call, hopefully you'll be able to follow along with what we're doing on the screen here. For those of you who are in the back, let me see if I can blow this thing up. Yes, I can. Okay. Whoa, that's too big. Too much. Too much. Okay. So when you log into HMIS as a user, you'll probably just see your home screen, right? This is my guest profile, so I don't really have a lot of stuff going on. But what I do have is you may be in the census place and you're going to do an intake or an admission for someone who's one of your clients. If you have an existing client you have to do a case note on, you would potentially go to charts if you're tracking services provision in HMIS, or if you're a social service agency like the welfare office or TAFs or DSS, you might go to services and describe what type of service was provided to the client, whether it's a placement for a hotel motel stay, etc. In this services module, if you're familiar with it, this is the way it always looks, except for this right here. Okay, so this is a new button that is created because this particular, because this particular program, which if you have multiple programs, like for instance, our interfaith hospitality or family promise folks, you might have your program for your shelter and your program for your rapid rehousing that are in this drop-down menu. We're just doing it in this training program for support services. Welcome, Maria. There is right here.
Michelle's coming to talk to me about.
Okay.
Thank you. Sorry, everybody.
So you would select whichever program it is that you're going to be doing the assessment in. Okay, and there's no requirement that you do this when you're doing an intake. Okay, so if we're taking someone into our support services only program set up with our shush placement or in shelter, there's no need to do this assessment. You don't have to do it the first day, so it's not creating extra work when you're doing an intake. The purpose of this is, let's say there's someone who doesn't just have to stay a couple of nights in shelter because they need to, they have the resources to move along, but these are folks that may have a disabling condition or other barriers, and they're staying for a longer period of time in hotel, motel, or shelter placement, or on the street, and we want to be able to prioritize them for the most, most impactful resources that we may have, like our permanent supportive housing. So I would select whatever program the client is that I'm going to conduct an assessment with, and then I would just click on our Tri-County CoC prioritization tool, and I'm going to do a let's just choose someone random. Fake test. I'm going to choose fake test's profile because I just did an intake with them last week. Okay, and I'm going to do this assessment tool with them. So I need to create a new tool. This is our form. Okay, and this is what the form looks like. Now, in order to update anything, you can see that there are some things that pre-populate. This was the purpose of trying to create the tool this way, because what we're trying to do is if there's any of the information that's needed for the assessment that you already collected when you did an intake with that client, it's going to pre-populate in this form for you to look at. So you don't have to go back and forth, you know, with your case file or with your HMIS profile.
Jay, do they have
Too small. Too small?
Well, yes.
Okay.
Do they have to be, can they be on the roster, or you know, if they're already discharged, or they have to be an ongoing client?
They would be an active client.
An active client,
Yep.
okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Is this pre-populating from the face sheet?
It is. It's pre-populating from the face sheet.
They're not.
So you anything and the fields that I'm using here, because we're anticipating that this assessment is predominantly going to be used with programs such as emergency shelter categorized programs, or maybe outreach or supportive services only programs. I'm using, in terms of pulling in information about income, about disabling condition, those types of things are all pulling from at admission. So that first intake that you did, not updates. So if there are any updates, you would probably need to do that in the form in addition, but it should pull in the most recent information, and especially if you're doing it in a shelter program, there's probably not a lot of updating you're doing at the outset if you know somebody has high barriers. So that stuff we'll talk about workshop. Another question?
I was just, you know, when you go in to look at the profile,
Yes.
and you're looking at under specific programs, is there any way going into the future that you can cross-populate? So if I have somebody who's under shush, and I want to put it in there, when I look it up, the information is only under my emergency shelter or my motel. Is there any way that when you go into the profile, you could then choose
the tool is actually under services, so it should follow them depending on how it's done. But either way, that information is pre-populated no matter what program it's done.
It should follow the client. It should be the client's information no matter what program they're entered in. The other thing to consider, I think that you were hinting at there, is if the client is in multiple programs or that type of thing.
Yeah.
It really shouldn't be an issue, because when we're doing, I'll show you how this information is then going to be used to create an actual prioritization list. We're going to be running that report, which is called a FormBuilder report builder, because, you know, everything has to have builder in it and foothold, okay? But using that form, we're going to be creating a list that can be pulled out to Excel, and you can deduplicate easily and use the prioritization to just deduplicate if, oh, this person is receiving a shush payment for something, so they're in the Sussex DSS program, but they're also in Samaritan Inn and have two separate assessments accidentally somehow. You can easily deduplicate that. That shouldn't be a problem or an issue. Go ahead, Giselle.
Now, a question in regards to the individuals who's at a PD shelter.
Uh-huh.
Now, DASAC does not enter any individuals. They don't use this tool at all.
Getting right to the difficult questions. Exactly right. Exactly right. So the way that this tool is going to help us is going to only be helpful as of now. This particular form is only for HMIS users, right? So that, you're right. DASAC, SAFE, and DAISY would not be able to use our HMIS system for this purpose. But that's why I mentioned that basically what we're going to be doing with this form builder is run a report and export that report to Excel. Okay, I've created a companion Excel spreadsheet that has all of the same fields that any DV or non-HMIS participating program could use to make a referral. And they can do the same thing, create the same prioritization score that would be generated by this form in HMIS, and we can just add them right into the spreadsheet of prioritization at any time whenever they're, you know, have someone that needs to be prioritized. Or, you know, the context here about the use of this tool now is one of the reasons we're trying to get this form honed, useful to you, and try to make it move in the next couple of months is that we actually are going to have some scheduled vacancies in our CoC vouchers. Okay, we through the hard work of Laura here at EHS, through the work of our case managers in some of our permanent supportive housing programs like Advanced Alternatives, and here at TAS and Family Promise, we have a bunch of, and DASAC, we had a bunch of folks that actually are moving on from the CoC vouchers that they have and moving on to a state rental assistance voucher. So that leaves vacancies in our CoC program so that we can fill them with eligible homeless folks. And we want to prioritize who needs it the most based on our coordinated assessment. Okay, so that's the reason for the timeline, is because those folks are probably going to be leased up in April at some point. And we want to be able to figure out if we can get this thing working, or even on a limited basis, if just a couple of folks who are going to be making those most prioritized referrals for these programs can get a hang of this, and we can just simply use our HMIS system to run that report, and then add in referrals from SAFE, DASAC, and DAISY, because we do have a couple CoC vouchers that are dedicated to victims of domestic violence, and make sure that we have a comprehensive list. This will be the first time that in a single spreadsheet, someone can see who are the folks across all 3 counties that need permanent housing, permanent supportive housing especially, because one of the things that's in this form that we'll go over, and let's just take a look at the form again. And I forget who I was doing the tool for. Oh, fake test, yes. How could I forget a name like fake test? Whoever we're doing this form for, there are questions that go to their basic eligibility for these programs, right? So, current household living situation. If they're on the street, in emergency shelter, in transitional housing, or in a hotel or motel voucher paid for by the Board of Social Services, they're eligible for permanent supportive housing. Right? So we'll be able to use this list to not just see who's needing housing, but who's actually eligible for the various programs that we can make a referral to right now.
Are there drop-downs for that one? I'm sorry.
Yeah, so let me show you how this works. So I hope everybody can kind of see where we are. I blew up the form a little bit, but this is for test fake, or fake test, I should say. In order to edit this form, you have to go all the way to the bottom first, and there's a thing that says update. So you have to click update, and then all of the drop-downs and the fields will appear. Okay, so we'll fill in the date of the assessment, which would be today, which is 3/1/2017, which I can't believe. It's terrifying in my life. Okay, and then what's the current housing situation? That would be a drop-down. I don't really honestly know fake test myself, but we're going to say that they're in an emergency shelter currently. Number of days the household has been in their current living situation. You see that pulled in from the face sheet based on the date that was entered for their intake. So I can select the appropriate range. It's between 91 days and 365. The reason that these are separated out is that there's a different score for folks that have been homeless in a homeless situation for more than a year, right? So that's why it's broken out. Residents prior, so this is someone who came to the emergency shelter they're staying in from the street. Okay, in the tool, if you look at the paper tool, there's a prioritization for folks who actually came from a literally on the street, unsheltered location, because we're assuming that that's a more vulnerable situation than coming from friends and family's house. Okay, so I'm going to say that they came from a place not meant for human habitation, because it's right there for me. Approximate date homelessness started. This is that date that you collect on the face sheet. Okay, so is that more than 12 months before I'm doing this assessment? The answer is no. Okay. Come on in. Welcome. No, very welcome. Have a seat. And then in terms of the next question, regardless of where they stayed last night, you see this is again a pre-populated one that comes in. This is from your intake interview. So I can answer that they've been homeless one single time, one single episode in the last 3 years. Total number of months, it's only been 1 month that they've actually been homeless in the past 3 years. That's not really congruent with what I saw up above, but this is fake test. I mean, you never know with the fake test people. So 1 month, I'm just going to select one. Sure. Okay, and then does any household member have a disabling condition? I'm going to say yes, because I'm assuming that fake test is only being assessed because I know she has or he has a disabling condition. I don't think they have a co-occurring disorder. I don't think they have trimorbidity, so I'm going to say no. No. Does the household meet the definition of chronically homeless? So I would know whether they meet the definition of chronically homeless based on these other fields. If they have a disabling condition, that's possible that they're chronically homeless. But based on these other answers, they've only been homeless 1 month in the last 3 years, one time, and they've only been staying for less than a year. So I know that they're not chronically homeless. Okay, so the answer for that one would be no. Monthly income sources, I didn't get that information somehow, so I can just answer this as no as of now because I don't have enough information to complete that. Monthly income amount, none. Okay, so then I know that there is no source of income. Okay, I forgot to collect it the right way maybe. And so the amount of monthly income is less than $800 a month. These are all variables that we can work to adjust. Right? One county that I know is using a similar form in HMIS, they're prioritizing based on household size and income amount, basically about the poverty rates, right? And if it's below the certain number of household members. So we can work and shift it in that way. Has any member of the household been a victim or survivor of domestic violence? We're going to say no because it's fake test. I have no idea. How many times? These are the last 3 questions of the form. How many times has the household or any member of the household had an incident with police, been to an emergency room or hospitalized, or inpatient psychiatric hospitalization? I'm going to make this information up. You should know that if you look at your tool on the paper form, that everybody that is saying yes to any of these questions gets a prioritization level that's pretty sizable. Basically tantamount to being chronically homeless. The same amount of points someone gets for being chronically homeless, you get for any one of these 3 questions having a yes, because these are literally what HUD said are examples of how you can gauge whether someone's vulnerable or, you know, at risk based on their homeless experience. Okay, so let's just say fake test has not experienced any of these trials in the past year. Well, let's say that they had 1 trip to the emergency room. Okay, that's still not going to give them any prioritization scores. Then, once I've completed this, as you can see, most of it was based on pre-populated information. Only those last 3 questions really are the ones that we needed to answer without any information already from HMIS. The other one that I really haven't done to pull in that may be, you know, just annoying a little bit for folks who are doing this in HMIS is the disability. Hopefully, if you're looking at this client record, you already know whether they have been entered as having a disabling condition and what their situation may be. But the problem is with pulling it into the HMIS form is that they're all separate fields in terms of whether it's a yes to each disabling condition. So I would have had to create like 8 different little bars right there so that you could see yes or no to HIV, to chronic health, to, you know, physical disabled. So it just made it, I didn't think it worked well, especially since the majority are probably just going to be a yes to disabling condition or a no to disabling condition and not trimorbid or co-occurring. Okay? So once I've entered all the magic information for fake test, all I do at the bottom is hit save. And as long as everything doesn't crash, you'll see that at the bottom, I'm going to have a prioritization score for this household. Okay? It automatically calculates the scores that are affiliated with each of the answers in the form and gives me a prioritization score. Okay? So why is that important? That means that it's really easy for someone who has access to this program to run a report that shows the prioritization score of this household and to put it in a sheet of prioritization with any other household from similar or even different programs. Okay, so what we'll eventually be able to do is run this report for all Tri-County CoC programs, and automatically everyone who has this form assessment completed will pull into that report along with their prioritization score. And it'll be as simple as that, except for obviously any outlier who's not in HMIS. Go ahead, Nick.
Will the household prioritization score be populated into the report if the client is not active in HMIS? Like if they had left the program or the shelter?
Nope.
So they have to be physically active.
There would need to be, so let's say you have someone who calls Family Promise, okay, and they are not an active client in Family
because
Promise.
they're not receiving shelter.
They're not
provided
receiving
by,
shelter.
emergency shelter services. So the prioritization is for those that are receiving emergency shelter services.
It could be emergency shelter. It could be an outreach program.
Okay.
Right? If there's a PATH team that is connected with that person, then they can potentially complete that. I have to personally address this with the PATH teams because they enter different information into HMIS than all of us do. They have different universal data element requirements, so I'm going to have to create a form that's tailored specifically to them or ask them if they're willing to, what I said before for those DV programs, fill out potentially another, like an Excel spreadsheet that'll create the same format for this report that I'm going to generate in HMIS.
So if we have a client that comes in, completes an assessment, and we put them into our case management, we'd be able to do this.
So you have a separate HMIS program that supports services only case management? Yes. Yep.
Would individuals who are receiving services or like the Division of Social Services in any county at that the county is paying for either in an apartment, a rooming house, or a motel be eligible?
As long as they're not discharged from that program and they're entered in HMIS, yes.
So the standards as far as, I mean, I know a lot when it comes to the applying for vouchers, Section 8, as well as the DCA. If they have a signed lease agreement already, they're not going to be considered homeless even though we're paying for them.
Exactly right.
They will be homeless if we stop paying.
That's exactly
How
right.
is that going to come into play when we have an individual that we know is exhausting their benefits by, and they will be homeless? How would that come into play?
Well, so that's a great question. This right now, Gisetta, you're looking around the curve. Okay, you're looking around the corner at the next frontier of what we're going to be needing to do with our prioritization. Right now, we're not equipped to coordinate prevention. That's something we need to be able to do and hope to be able to do. We can even use similar or the same, type of technology with our HMIS programs to do that. But right now, we are only, with this particular prioritization tool, we're only prioritizing for folks who are literally homeless and have a disabling condition for permanent supportive housing and are literally homeless and might be able to get rapid rehousing or some other form of housing because of their literal homeless status.
It does raise an issue, though, of not just the people that are housed and about to max out, but the people who have already maxed out and aren't receiving any kinds of services, because there has to be a way to keep.
From social services point of view, I mean, it might be a little bit different within the shelters because they're going to operate a little bit differently as far as our program requirements. But for us, it's going to be way, way hard. I mean, we probably won't even have nobody on it if you look at it, because if we look at SHUSH, someone call a hotline, we're not.
You're either housing them or you send them on their way. So,
they're not on any kind of a list to be able to help them going forward, because even though we've only done 2 days, they're gone.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean their need has ended.
So that's fine. But for someone who you are, let's say you're using SHUSH to place in a hotel or motel, how long is that assistance lasting?
Could be 2 days.
Okay, is it ever going to be more than 2 days?
It might be up to 5 or 7.
Okay, if it's not going to, we have to determine, that's one of the purposes of this, and one of the purposes of me saying that you don't have to do this assessment at the intake point. We have to determine as a Tri-County what our policies and procedures are going to be for each type of agency when they're going to do this assessment with their clients, right? From my perspective, someone who's being placed in a hotel or motel for 2 days is very likely not going to be prioritized, period. Because as far as we know, they're only homeless for 2 days.
But Jay,
if they move on. Keep going. Good.
I was going to say, that person that might be housed for 2 days, right, may not be eligible for anything and still be homeless, but not housed again because there's no mechanism to shelter them in a hotel motel. So if you know that, then an assessment can be done on them at that time.
But the minute we discharge, it's not
No, it's still available.
It's still available. It's just you wouldn't be able to update anything from the system, but you would be able to put them on a waiting list and leave them on that list.
We don't have that.
Even when but we don't have that yet. I mean, it's coming soon. But, I mean, that's the way it's meant to work. So that person who may not be receiving services from anybody could still be on the waiting list and be able, and, you know, having been assessed and put on a waiting list and prioritize whatever their prioritization is. And you'll be able to look at that waiting list and go through those people, and then you'll set a standard as a community how often you're going to be in contact with those people or follow up with them or whatever. You know.
Well, and that's the thing, right? So if, let's say that I pull this report for everyone who's had an assessment completed for them in HMIS per today, right? And the gentleman you just placed in a hotel motel with shush dollars is active today, and you completed an assessment form. He'd show up on my list, right? There's no reason why I should take him off that list if we're going to continue to run this report next week. And when I run it next week and he doesn't pull in because he's been discharged, but we still haven't resolved whether he's gone to a homeless or non-homeless destination, we can, if you have contact information, we can follow up. If he's been linked to PATH services, we can see if that has continued with case management because he'll still be in our HMIS system. So there's a range of ways to keep track of it, and kind of similar to what Jen has been working on with the master list committee for veterans, we can, you know, use this as a tool to case conference. If there's two agencies that touch the same client and see that they're in the prioritization queue for rapid rehousing or for permanent housing, but we don't know because they got discharged from the board's, you know, from TAS's role, we don't know where they're at right now, we can still keep touch and make sure they don't get just taken off of the list. We have to create that whole system of policy of saying, okay, TAS, in this circumstance, this is when you would do an assessment to prioritize someone for permanent supportive housing. This number of days into their stay, right? The reason that I say that the time frame is an important way to potentially gauge this, a lot of communities, if you have a family or an individual come into your shelter, the majority leave within 10 days in some communities, okay? And so if the majority in our communities stay less than 30 days or less than 60 days, you know, if we want to set a time frame where, okay, everybody that's staying more than a month in my shelter or in my hotel motel placements, you know, even if it's not shush placements, you know, and we need to figure out how to get the folks that are staying in EA and TANF, you know, or EA TANF or EA GA hotel motel placements for more than a month. We need to figure out how to get that into our system for HMIS so that we can get a prioritization score for them. We'll do it.
Just throwing it out there, a lot of communities are doing that, putting their EA in, like Atlantic County just started.
But regardless,
just saying.
But regardless, it doesn't have to be everybody, right? That's what I'm saying. Like if we set the basement of, you know, there's probably some people that don't stay more than 60 days in your hotel motel placements, whether it's EA TANF or EA GA or shush, right? And we can use the data that you have in-house at the various social service agencies, and we can run HMIS reports for our Family Promise shelters and ask, what is your average length of stay? What is the average length of stay for someone who is solving their own issue, who may just be dealing with an eviction and a bad landlord or one medical expense that cost them their housing, and they're going to get back on their feet because they have a support network, a family, another job somewhere else, whatever. And we can look at that information and make our best guidance and see if we can use that as, okay, anyone who stays beyond that threshold, we know they're probably going to need additional support or resources beyond what we're providing already with case management, linkage to entitlements, etc., through our boards and through our shelters. Yeah.
Now, just to semi still on the same topic. Now, with DASAC, within our social service unit, I handle all the DASAC individuals. Now, there's some individuals who might not be eligible for emergency assistance.
Okay.
And at the time, it might be due to income.
Right.
That's the vast majority of times.
Uh-huh.
Now, they do keep their individuals in there for quite some time. So, with that being said, would I outreach and make sure, because I don't directly be involved with them, and how will I go, what would be your suggestion, if anybody able to add on to this? What would be your suggestion as far as to get these individuals, if I know that they get an SSD, you know, they're not eligible for none of our, you know, none of our programs, they have minimum income that they would not be able to afford on their own based upon the income. What would be your suggestion as far as to implement this to
get them to the table? It's kind of their responsibility, you
So,
know?
I mean, here's
really,
the bottom line of how to get them engaged. There's not a lot of permanent housing out there in terms of our Tri-County region and the resources that are available. You basically have, Hunterdon has a couple of Section 8 vouchers that open up infrequently. We have a couple of housing authorities that provide those types of resources. And then you have the CoC vouchers. There are also a couple of small multifamily developments that do have some preferences for homeless persons, but they have very little turnover. Okay, so there's not a lot of resources. So right now, we know we're going to get 12.5 CoC vouchers freed up in the next 2 months. Right, that's a big infusion of potential available housing for our community. Nobody's going to be eligible if we say, you know, you didn't do an assessment with that client, we can't prioritize them for this resource. The CoC has the authority to do that because we're compelled by HUD to only place people in permanent supportive housing programs funded by the CoC using coordinated assessment. So that's it. Even the folks that are using the dollars, we can say, don't take any placements from your side door, right? I mean, within reason, right? We don't want to keep them without filling their unit for 3, 4, 5 months. We want to try and get the placements as quickly as possible. So that's the way we can, you know, kind of help people understand. Just so you know, DASAC has a couple, I think 3 different programs that they sponsor with the Warren Housing Office as the sponsor agency. Those are CoC funded units. They're not going to be able to place their own people in those units if they don't do an assessment with them.
That's interesting.
I mean, it's just straight up, that's it. I mean, it's, the CoC is saying that this is what we have to do because literally it's federal regulation that we utilize this funding in conjunction with coordinated assessment. This is the assessment the CoC has said is standardized. It meets the definitions that HUD has set forth. And we have to place people on the basis of priority because there's also a preference. There's you know, domestic violence is one of the criteria that we give prioritization for. There's no reason for folks to shy away. I have someone on SSD who's been homeless for a while, who's a victim of domestic violence. They're going to be close to the top of the list.
CoC vouchers, the priority population is domestic violence. So, I mean.
And that's the thing, too. We're going to create this prioritization list. The top 5 people on the prioritization list might not have any, you know, any experience with being a victim or a survivor of domestic violence. And the CoC voucher we may be filling has to serve a victim of domestic violence. So we're going to have to go down our prioritization list to the first eligible client and then use that as our referral to this DASAC voucher, which is really a Warren Housing Office voucher with DASAC as the sponsor. So this is the, you know, the way we have to establish priorities, is to think about it in terms of where and when and who is doing that assessment, and then how does that translate into us actually placing and referring folks so they get into housing as quick as possible. It's got to be, you know, it's going to be a lot of quick turnaround in March and April to try to figure this out together, because we need to ensure that our CoC vouchers don't stay dormant in our CoC, right? So if we lease up these moving on vouchers and by we, I mean the service providers that are doing this great job moving their folks on, and then we don't have a placement ready for 2 months, we're not meeting our goal. We have to have that referral ready so that somebody moves out, they got a DCA, signs the lease and is paying the landlord, and then we have this voucher that's ready for someone else. So we got to be ready for that to try to hit the ground running as much as possible.
And
so,
it will also affect your system performance measures.
Right,
if you
and
move your beds
we want our utilization to be good. We want to expend all of the dollars we're given. We don't want to send anything back to HUD and be like, okay, yeah, thanks for all the money. We didn't use $10,000 of it.
I have a question. I'm sorry.
Sure.
At Sioux Falls,
yeah,
we don't use HMIS,
mm-hmm.
but when you mentioned the past programs that use it, we do outreach to homeless and people that are at risk of becoming homeless, and some of them may not be linked into any shelter,
right.
And in which case you're saying they wouldn't be active on this network, right? And therefore they're not being prioritized at all.
Correct.
And so I guess I want to have a further conversation about how we could maybe make some of that, or share what we already have in our electronic medical records in terms of housing.
So we've just had a couple of federally qualified health centers come into HMIS.
Oh, cool.
Just for that
Which
reason.
one?
Atlantic Care.
Okay.
And there's another one in South Jersey. I can't remember the name.
Complete Care or Southern Jersey Farm Medical?
It might be Southern Jersey, yeah. So Atlantic Care in Atlantic City.
Okay.
For that reason, because they're participating in the CoC and they won't use it for much, probably.
Right.
Right? Who wants another database?
Even if you have folks that are experiencing homelessness and you make the referral to an agency who is going to do outreach and put it in HMIS, or if we create an MOU between Sioux Falls and the CoC, like we're kind of probably going to have to do with some programs who are not participating in HMIS, and say, here's the Excel spreadsheet. If you complete these fields, we'll be able to give a prioritization score to that consumer who's living somewhere and only accessed medical care because they had to, rather than housing assistance through one of our other providers.
Right.
That can be the link, and then they'll be integrated into the prioritization tool.
Yeah, that would be good. I think that would be
so
good.
Those are the types of nuances that we'll all have to navigate with any provider that wants to participate. So just a quick recap. I'm just going to quickly go back through this and I brought the keyboard over here, so that everybody can see once again. See if I'm in the right window. There we go. Okay, so just so everybody remembers where this was, okay, we're in charts and under services. For those of you who are at TAS and DSS, you know where we're going into the services module. Tri-County CoC prioritization tool, and then you just select whichever consumer it is that you're actually doing the assessment with. You can click continue. As you can see, I already created one for Samaj Adams, and that's going to pull into our report builder, which we're going to do. And then all you would have to do is either update the existing form, which I did today, or you could create a new one if it needed to be totally changed, or if it was a subsequent HMIS interaction. Okay, so I'm going to go back and I'm going to log out.
See if anyone has any questions.
Yes, I just did that a minute ago. That's a good idea. Yeah. Okay. Oh, there is a question. I mean, this is too small.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. From Morris.
You can open it up.
Family Promise United Way. Who is managing the CA screening for Tri-County? Okay, so a question about who is managing the screening for Tri-County. That's an excellent question. We have not determined that, right? Who is actually responsible for doing this as of now? Right now, per HMIS, I'm the only person in the CoC that has read and write access through all the programs. So we have to figure out how we're going to designate that responsibility moving forward eventually. But for now, in the next couple of months, realistically, we're going to have to be funneling it, and I'm going to have to be helping to run these report builders, which is fine. We just need to all be on the same page about the fact that we need to plan around that moving forward. Okay, so great question. Thanks out there in cyberspace. I'll try to keep coming back to your questions. So I just wanted to show you again where that was. I'm going to log out and go into my other profile, my actual profile. That was not my profile. And the reason that I'm logging in here is because I'm going to show you what we just created. Okay, so I'm going to go to administration. I have this unit here called FormBuilder. If you are interested in examining this, or if we work with, within our CoC to determine another agency other than me or other than the CoC lead who's going to be working on it.
Right now, nobody has any access to FormBuilder,
okay.
and you guys kind of have special.
Right.
So
and I had to go through a training just to get access to it. Anyway.
Really want.
So we have to figure out how we're going to make this work in terms of who's got access to it moving forward. But let me show you what we generated here. Okay, I'm not going to select an agency because I'm going to run it for a specific one, and I need to do a FormBuilder report builder. And then I can choose the program. The training program that we used, in case you missed it, was training services only. Okay, and
Up some more.
thank you.
Right.
There we go.
Up.
Ah! Got it. Okay. So what we could do once multiple programs are utilizing this, whatever programs have access to this form, we could just run a report for all Tri-County programs, and that would allow us to run it for multiple agencies at the same time. But right now I'm just going to do it for this program, since that's the only one I've done any assessments for. I'm going to try to get rid of this nonsense down here so I can continue. Okay, and as you can see, there's going to be new forms elements. And this is a different form here.
I've never seen.
Oh, this is the wrong form. I went into the wrong form.
You want a regular report builder?
No,
That's what I'm thinking. That's what I'm thinking. I think in reality, the way it should function is you pull it from the report builders because nobody else has access to this.
It's just a HMIS
So
report
it's a
builder?
regular.
It would be like an HMIS
service
report builder because only the HMIS team in Monarch has access to FormBuilder.
Okay.
So because they don't have access to that.
Well, I just did this before, so I don't know
Oh,
how
really?
I messed it up, but that's okay. Services only, report builders, HMIS report builder. Okay, training services only. Continue. See if we have our form fields here. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's HMIS report builder, or FormBuilder report builder. Let me just see if I can do it here. Ah, here's what I did. I forgot to select the form. Okay? Thank you, HMIS. My fault. Okay, so I'm doing it for the program, and I could select whatever programs have access to this tool. I want to do it for this particular form, which is our prioritization tool. I can hit continue. And now I'm going to have some universal data elements, so I can decide to sort by the client and their household ID so that I have identifying markers that I can sort by. And then I can do check all for my form, and I have all of the fields that I need. And then continue. Okay, and this is going to create the beautiful prioritization list. It's going to be 4 people, I think. I only did 4 forms, I think. Yep, 4 people. Okay, so let me try to zoom out a little bit. But you can see here, for instance, this is our first record. Okay, I have all of the information here, including the dates, and I have the household prioritization score. So all I would have to do is export this to Excel, and I could sort it. And we could have a prioritization list. That's what we're talking about. That's why that form works, is it actually creates the information necessary to just sort by household prioritization score. Okay? So I need feedback on any thoughts or questions that you have right off the top of your head. Okay, and then secondly, let's go through this tool quickly. All right, I just want to walk through it quickly together, and then we'll go back to other questions. All right. So this is the same tool we talked about at multiple meetings last year. It is printed front and back. So for someone who's doing a paper form, this is kind of what it would look like, but I'm also distributed, like I said, an Excel tool, which actually is going to really be what would be completing, because then it just easily integrates with the report that we would run. Okay, so if you flip over the back of the first page, living situation, again, you can see that there's prioritization based on where someone is that night when you're conducting this assessment. If you're an outreach program and you're working with someone who is on the street or in a tent, our assumption is that you're dealing with someone who is more vulnerable than if they were already in a shelter or staying at home with someone who they had to move out from in a couple of days. So that's why there's prioritization for place not meant for human habitation. Okay? You go to question, and please stop me, yell at me, do a rude gesture. I respond to all forms of, getting my attention. Just let me know if you have any questions about anything as I'm moving along, because I'm going to go back through quick, since we've already discussed this tool before. Okay, are agencies sharing data in HMIS? I got a question. Can you share the tool on the screen? Ooh, that's a good question. I can try to share the tool on the screen. Yes, I can try. Let me give it a shot. Okay, I sent it to Vanessa. So I'm going to send it to myself and pull it up in my mail. Okay. All right, so in question 2, all right, thank you for the person with the question. I'm going to try to pull up the assessment tool on the screen. In terms of agencies sharing data in HMIS, no, it's not being shared. No sharing of data at this juncture. Just for the purposes of coordinated assessment, someone would be able to run this report, which kind of centralizes access to multiple agencies' data. It's really not agencies sharing their data with other agencies. Okay. All right. So let me see if I can get this jazz to work. Don't anybody look. Definitely don't look at my inbox. It's embarrassing. Okay, we're going to look at the assessment tool, and that's it. Okay. Sweet. All right, folks. Jackpot. We have overcome. All right. So, how long have you been staying there? Is question 2. If we're talking about someone who's in shelter or on the street in a homeless situation, the answer is going to be scoring a 3 or a prioritization score if they've been staying there for 1 year or longer, which is part of that chronic homeless definition. For residents prior, again, if it's someone who's in a shelter but they came from the street, we're going to assume that they came from a more vulnerable place than if they came from with friends and family, so there's a point for residents prior. That's associated just with being unsheltered. Approximate date homelessness started, that's to calculate, actually what their length of homelessness is overall, not just where they're staying in that program, because that field, for instance, that you saw populated in the FormBuilder is based on whether this date is 12 months ago or not. So this is not just, I've been staying in shelter for 6 months, but before I was in shelter for 6 months, I was on the street for 6 months. That's 12 months of homelessness.
If I've got somebody, we have a program in HMIS which is providing case management,
okay,
like that. So they're not necessarily homeless. They were homeless before we started, you know what I mean? They were homeless previously. Now they're temporarily housed or, temporary voucher. So their homelessness, they're not currently homeless. That's how would I answer their current episode, the date it started.
Right. So,
can I ask that correctly?
No, that's a great question.
Okay.
That's a great question. So, you would not be able to answer that question because they wouldn't be homeless.
Right.
So do you even have to do this at that point?
Correct. So here's the reality. Unfortunately, we have limited resources, and there's no way that someone who's not literally homeless is going to be prioritized for a permanent supported housing voucher right now. So anyone who doesn't meet that HUD definition of being on the street, in transitional housing even, but pretty much just emergency shelter or on the street or hotel motel voucher, there's no way they're going to jump up the list, because right now they are safely, at least, you know, by your description, they're housed temporarily, whereas someone who's on the street or in shelter is not housed.
So I wouldn't do the assessment for those particular clients.
That would be my recommendation for instituting our policy, that you would only conduct this, at least now, based on the resources we have available. We don't want to just assess for the purpose of assessing, right, and then add someone to a list where they're not realistically going to get access to that resource. So anyone who's not literally homeless right now, let's think about what our point in time counts look like, right? If we have 300 some people in the Tri-County region who are homeless on any given night, and we have 10 turnover beds on average every year for permanent supportive housing, there's no way that the folks who are not even qualified as homeless are going to be prioritized. That's just the way it is based on the resources we have right now. So that's a great point, right? And that's a great thing to think about when we're thinking about the implications of what we're prioritizing and how we're prioritizing. For question 5, regardless of where they stayed, number of times they've been on the street or homeless situations, there's prioritization for if it's 4 or more times, because that's the threshold for chronic homelessness. And then you can see there's lesser prioritization for other lengths of time. Same thing with the number of months total in the past 3 years. Disabling condition for a household member is partially prioritized. And then, again, like I said in the FormBuilder, trimorbidity and co-occurring disorders. If you read through the VI SPDAT, which is one of those really wonky and cool assessments that HUD recommends, right? It's really long. And if you read through the healthcare sections of that assessment, basically what it boils down to in their scoring is, does someone have multiple disabling conditions that count as co-occurring, or do they have trimorbidity, which is co-occurring, or, you know, multiple disabling conditions plus a chronic health condition? So that's what we're boiling it down to in our simplified and shortened assessment. Okay? Does the household meet the definition of chronically homeless? That's a big one, of course, because HUD wants us to prioritize the chronically homeless. So that's 5 points if they meet that definition. For income, sources of income that are like SSD or SSI or veterans disability benefits, Social Security, we count these folks as having fixed incomes, right? There's not maybe as much prospect of them getting employment or other forms of income if they're disabled and have that fixed income. So there's a prioritization score for that. Same thing with the amount of income they have. If they have a very low income, less likelihood that they're going to be able to fend for themselves out in the real world for rentals. So we prioritize right now just household income overall under $800. If we think that that artificially penalizes families because they might be likely to have more income, then we have to change this, right? And we can make a range. Household of 2, 16, whatever. Okay?
Okay, before you go on there,
yeah, go ahead.
Refresh my mind with score 1, score 2 there. What is that? How does that scoring work?
Sure. So you get 3 points if you're getting any one of these types of income. So SSI, SSD, veterans disability, or disability insurance. The reason being because it's you have a disabling condition that inhibits your ability to get other forms of income. So we're assuming that that person's on a fixed income.
And that score goes into column number score 1.
Right. And also if they have no source of income, then they get that prioritization. Go ahead, Gisetta.
I'm sorry. The monitors real quick. Now, when we, for SOC, will we be looking at the gross or the net amount? Because I have worked with individuals before that had a child support that was taken out, not Social Security, you know, the Medicare and anything, child support taken out. What would we enter? What would we be looking at? Would we be looking at the gross amount?
We can make that determination together. Okay. I don't think that HMIS prescribes what amount you're putting in their policies for intake of some sort of you know, entitlement program. So if we want to say, all right, everybody do net, we can do that. Because the reality is, if you have a guy who's getting, you know, a couple $100 in SSI payments a year, you know, a month, and he's got 2 kids that he's paying alimony for, he's getting almost nothing, right? So, I mean, reality is he's not going to get housing on his own, potentially, based on that income getting garnished.
Now, with that, but we will also need to know how the voucher is actually set up. What is the requirement of the income of the individual? Because it might be stipulations that's written in there saying that, you know, the gross amount.
Right.
You know, so that's something
that's exactly right. So whoever is making these referrals has to, and we have, as a community, have to know every program's eligibility criteria that are going to receive referrals, right? This is one of the reasons why coordinated assessment sells well to some of our agencies, right? There can be butting of heads between boards of social services or TASC and these other agencies, because I got an ineligible referral like 2 times, 3 times last week, or you know, whatever call-in after hours sent me someone the next day and they're not eligible. They didn't know they had a family member or whatever it was, and this hopefully will make everybody get the same knowledge of what everybody's program acceptance criteria are. Especially at this juncture, we're really just talking about the permanent housing opportunities, not the sheltering options. Okay, eventually, if we want to, like the case that I think Donna had said with, you know, prevention, or you said as well, which is like prevention, folks who aren't actually homeless but are trying to access shelter or access some other resource, we can get to that point where everybody's on the same page. You know, okay, I have no more money for shush right now because I ran out. Maybe you can get this. Maybe you can get HAP from Family Promise, or maybe, you know, or HPP, I mean. You know, those types of things. Yeah, not HAP. Okay, so go ahead. Sorry, Domenica.
All right, logistics.
Yeah.
You have listed, anybody, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 teams, score 1. Why are they just grouped together?
Because this is made to mimic where the HMIS fields are in the drop-downs. In the drop-downs in HMIS.
I understand that.
Yeah.
So why?
So here's the thing. If you're doing this in HMIS,
Yeah.
you don't have to worry about any of that. It's literally going to pre-populate their source of income right in the form, and you're going to see right above that question, does this person have any one, and it's going to be in order.
Okay.
So it's in the form, it's all in order. On this paper one, it's not, because it's made to mimic, and I can address that. We can reformat the form.
Can we go in and do tests with it? To take a look at it at this point in time.
Sorry, folks on the phone. I wanted to blow this up for you. You mean with the paper form or the actual form in HMIS? So here's the problem with that. We can't do test runs right now. If we could, right? I could give you access to this form and we could work on it. But you can never delete that information, right? So I want to get the form right.
Yeah.
And we want to not have to mess with it for a long time if possible. I mean, if something happens, we'll figure it out, right? If I think, oh yes, I've finally gotten the perfect form, and there's a typo, you know, then we can fix that, and we'll just backtrack, and I'll apologize profusely, and the HMIS people will fire me. But other than that,
access to the training program, though, right?
so I can't give her access to the training program. So I can show, like I said, I can show you, like I've just done, and we can do more of that. And then we could also experiment with something where maybe we do it with some Excels, right? And you do the actual surveys with like a case file or with a client, and do it in Excel. We create it in the spreadsheet, and you see what scores people are getting. And then we, you know, say, hey, this is weighted. You know, we already kind of did that. I know Gisetta had done a bunch with her team. But if you want to go back and re-review it, now's the time.
Well,
so that's fine.
I remember when we first started HMIS a billion years ago, and the most productive part of the
hands-on
work was being able to.
Well, so let me think about that. I mean, there might be a way that we can give, you know, access to the training programs for a limited amount of time or whatever.
Show up to all a real person. So that was one of the things. But what we had, by actually having access to it, we might find something that's not working that would benefit.
I mean, the reality is if we want to have a meeting or a webinar, well, not a webinar, it wouldn't work that way, but if we wanted to have a training where, you know, without telling Candy, right? If I had my training login and I could give you guys, we could be on a computer together and everybody could take a turn going through and filling out a couple forms with with someone, or they designate one for the Tri-County CoC to test something. We can run as many training program forms as we want because it's not going to hurt anybody.
Right, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Seeing how that is utilized, which may then, particularly for people like me who are not horrible computer networks, if I can get through it and there's no glitches, then it's pretty much going to work for anybody.
That's my goal, Domenica.
I know it is.
Not to bring it to the lowest common denominator, but to make it so that anybody can use it. Well, not just user friendly. The reason that this is the assessment that we came up with is in part because it creates the least amount of work, because you don't have to do it for everybody. It's only going to be for a select group of folks, maybe, depending on how long we're waiting to complete this assessment, or with certain types of clients, right? We have to figure out how to do that and still not be, discriminatory, right? And figure that out, because then this is pre-populating most of the information we need. It's, it's pretty low in terms of time dedicated, except it's more than we already do. The bottom line is it's more work than you already do, right? That's just the baseline assumption. But it's, as far as we can tell, by we, I mean the people that we talked to about it last year and me, right? The least amount of work that we can do and still meet our goal of meeting the HUD criteria.
So let me make sure I've got this perfectly clear.
Cool. I think we're going to leave this open. It's a little hot in here.
Yeah. I have a client who is placed under SHUSH. I fill out that intake and admission form.
Yep.
Right? That information is going to populate over into this particular tool.
Correct.
So there should be very little additional information I should need to fill in.
There's not a lot. There's 3 questions at the end that are about specific types of experiences that they may have had that, are proxy measurements for vulnerability.
The police, the hospital.
Okay. And, so those are the extra questions. And then there may be, like I said, that disabling condition field, answering information about the household member's disabling condition. That's going to be one that I couldn't really logistically pull over easily into the form from the face sheet. We can, if you want me to try it, I can show you what it would look like with it. I looked at it and I thought this is too confusing, because it's going to be like disabling condition at intake, HIV, yes, disabling intake at, it's got every one of them. And I think you're going to know that client or that case and have it marked out anyway when you know you have to do an assessment for that person, I think, based on my knowledge of what case managers are dealing with on a day-to-day basis.
And if you're going to include the leasing program in there, too, that's like anybody in the household, so that's not...
Sure, exactly.
Yeah.
It could be any member of the household. So, okay, so this was the income question. I had a question from, I think it was Janice out there in cyberspace. Hi, Janice. About why the $800 a month figure was chosen. I think that the reason for the folks who helped create this form that it was chosen was because of the threshold of certain types of fixed incomes on a monthly basis, that below that you would have SSI, SSD, GA, etc. So that's why that was chosen. It's pliable right now. Right now, we can workshop this tool if we think that we need to make adjustments and accommodations in a different way. All right, question 11, has any member of the household been a victim or survivor of domestic violence within the past 6 months? Okay. The reason being is that technically HUD wants this program to be utilized to serve folks who are actively fleeing domestic violence, and that's the cause of their homelessness. That could be folks that are in, shelter. If it's longer than that, then we can figure out how we want to address that. If you want if we want to change this criteria, that's fine. Or phrase it differently, like that caused your homelessness in the last year, or whatever it is. How many times have they had an interaction with the police? and then emergency room, and then inpatient psychiatric. Those are the 3 that no one will have any information from in HMIS prior to doing this assessment. So that's going to be separate questions that we would ask those clients at the time of completing the assessment. Don't need to do it up front, just at the time of completing the assessment. The reason being, again, these are the only 3 criteria that HUD specifically earmarked as proxy measurements for vulnerability when they gave us guidance on coordinated assessment. So that's why we're using them. Okay? And then there's going to be that scoring that we do. And there are some, based on the form, you can calculate, okay, the very minimum of someone who's homeless and who has a disabling condition technically would be 5, right? If they're in a hotel-motel placement, they're homeless, but they only get 1 point for prioritization, and they may just have a disabling condition in the household, which only gets them a couple points. It's not chronically homeless, it's not multiple disabling conditions, not a long-time homeless. Okay, you could still get a very low prioritized person who meets the definition and criteria for being eligible for a CSC voucher. So eventually, we want to house all of the folks that are high priority and get to the point where we need to be more finite in the ways we're distinguishing between households. We're not there yet. We just don't have enough resources, and we've got too many folks that we're trying to serve. So, so that's our form. I don't really know what the next step is for you all with regard to this paper form. Firstly, does anybody want to ask a question or make a suggestion about this form that we should consider with the group? We already had the one about, income raise, the one about the sources of income as to why that is. One of the questions that we got from folks in cyberspace was about that. So are there any other pieces of this assessment that you think you haven't seen or you had seen and you're going back to? I mean, the overall goal is to answer the question, who needs the housing the most? There's different ways to answer that question depending on what your thought process or philosophy is. HUD's thought process and philosophy is what they're trying to ask us to buy into, is that the people who've been homeless the longest and have the greatest service needs or barriers to housing should be the ones that get the housing first. Right? That's different from a philosophy that, someone who's done everything right and is right on the cusp and has only been homeless for a little while and needs just a little bit, needs to be the first person to get it. That's very different, polar opposite almost. Okay, so we have to grapple with that and figure out what we need to do to account for that diversity of opinion, or we need to say, hey, I think this is good for this. Maybe we need to do something different or distinct in some way for other programs that we have, or prevention funds, or light touch assistance, like different ways that our rapid rehousing or SSDF stuff can be used. So any other questions, comments, concerns? You need this?
No, is anybody else?
Oh, any other questions in cyberspace? Let's check the record, shall we? All right. No extra questions right now. Okay.
Okay.
So, go ahead. Okay. So, congratulations. We've addressed agenda item 1.
And Michelle has agenda item 2.
Good.
So go ahead, Michelle, if you want to say
Sure. Very quick, actually, a couple minutes. I wanted to ask if the shelters are doing any health assessments at intake. So our residents or clients that you guys are working with, when they come to your organization and you complete an intake with them, are you asking them, are you linked to a primary care doctor? When was the last time you went to see a doctor? Based on, it doesn't matter whether they have insurance or not, but I don't know if you're asking, do you have Medicaid? Are you insured?
That's on the HMIS.
That's a HMIS question.
Yeah, that's him.
Yeah,
Okay,
insurance.
so insurance. Okay, do you ask them, do they have a doctor, a medical doctor? When was the last time they were seen at a medical provider's office? Do they have a dentist? And I guess the question is, if they answer no to those, where are you referring them to? Or just wanting to kind of hone in on
referrals to primary
Part
care.
of the issue is we physically see people who are coming into our agency here applying for emergency assistance, so GA clients and clients. The people who call our hotline, that is not normally the depth of the questioning that is involved. If there's a follow-up, if they indicate with us following contact again, that may be a conversation that is held, but it is not normal. Because our clients at that point in time are much more concerned about where they're going to lay their heads that night than they are about whether staff, obviously, if they're indicating to us that there are other needs and issues, we are going to try to address them. But I don't think it's a norm for us. But again, we're not shelter per se, we're the agency.
Right. So this question is being put out to everyone, whether you're a shelter. So if you have someone that's going to spend the night, in your facility, right, under your roof, are you asking, hey, how are you sick? Do you have?
That is on our intake form that when we meet the clients for the first time before they're coming into the shelter, those questions are asked. Yes.
Are asked. Mm-hmm. Are they, if they don't have a doctor?
Then I would normally refer them to social services to apply for Medicaid.
But they're not referred to a doctor. You're not saying you really need to get checked out because you have some sort of abrasion on your arm or you're scratching your body all over and you look like you need to see a doctor.
I don't get a lot of itchy people.
No, but if somebody presented with a health problem,
Do shelters ask about bed bugs?
Yes, we do, and Michelle, yes, we do ask. We obviously, at that point of intake, we go through the whole thing, who's your primary care physician, even what are your medications, are there any health issues, and obviously we do refer to a local Medicaid provider, to any local provider. And a lot of our clients are Medicaid, and we do both, it's right up there for sure.
Okay, yeah, just curious, because I wasn't sure if it was like a formal part of the process.
That's us, I can't speak for,
Right, so you guys are.
Okay.
In Warren.
I can say that if someone comes in and they have disclosed to us, usually during our interviewing process, we're finding out, if they have any various medical conditions, high blood pressure, whatever. And at that point in time, I mean, we have provided them with either, medical physicians that's within the area that they would be able to, contact and go to, as well as local business office if they saying that they have any type of, dental problems, pharmacies, even if they might have, they might be on SMC, they might have Medicare, and they might have a copay. We provide them a lot of resources.
So I guess the question is, so you guys are giving them the resources. It's not like a formal process. Somebody comes in, they aren't linked, and a call is made, like, by the way, there's this person who's just coming in the shelter, hasn't seen a doctor in 5 years, clearly are in need of some kind of medical attention, can an appointment be made? It's you're leaving the onus on the client.
Depending on the situation. We have made phone calls if we need to get someone in, and we know I had someone who had the MRSA where I had to call around in creation to get them somewhere. So it depends on the situation and if it's disclosed. Now, all the time it's disclosed to us in regards to if they do have a medical condition and if they want to seek treatment. So if it's disclosed, definitely 100%, we're going to provide them, and even we will do the outreach in regards to seeing what can be done and any services that can be implemented. But, if it's not disclosed to us, it's not like we're pressuring them, like we're pulling it out.
I guess I just wanted to formally propose it as a, Tri-County continuum. You may want to look at that more closely so that we're ensuring that while these people are accessing some kind of service and are there with a provider that has the know-how to do that, that they get linked as soon as possible, so if it's one piece of their pie that you can say, at least we know that at intake these people, we're catching them. If they're not linked, let's proactively start this process, move it along. And Zufall, if you're anywhere in Warren or Sussex County and even Hunterdon, which I believe is everyone here, right?
Right.
We're just a phone call away, and it's a matter of FYI, I have X number of people that need a medical doctor, I have X number of people that need a dentist.
you know, when can we schedule that, and bam. So that's all.
So the onus would be on them, though, for clients who aren't in our shelter program, who aren't participating in any of our other programs, and who are just calling for information and referral. We provide a great deal of information on referral, and at that point, we would give them the contact information, and it would be on them to contact you. But if they're our client, we certainly will get involved.
You're saying if they're only
in these
shelter
programs.
versus if they're shelter and or.
Yeah, if we just have a caller, just
Oh,
we
just
receive
some call.
an inordinate amount of calls. We just have a caller calling in for service, and they're not eligible for any service.
Oh, right.
We determine that they are in need of medical care.
Right.
We would make that
Of course,
call. But we wouldn't provide any follow-up.
Right, but the clients, I'm talking about the clients, I'm talking about the people that come in and you're surveying, not just people that are calling.
Well, we're all our clients.
But that's staying at the shelter. It's staying at the shelter.
Yeah, I'm assuming you all do like a full medical background check on
No, Homeless Solutions, and that's the lowest in Morris County.
County. They don't do that at all.
They don't ask people staying in their shelter, but they don't ask.
Wow.
No other reason to
Prevent
Well,
protect
that's what I
yourself.
would
Yeah,
think.
sure.
But not.
Why are you coming here?
We are already in Phillipsburg with our mobile units, and as long, yeah, we applied and we did not get funded for P-Burg, and so we have absolutely zero money. The only way we can get to P-Burg is if we start seeing patients on our van, and the more patients we have, the more will be there. But right now, Coventry is open, and for us, we have a timeline as to we're going to reach out. I'll reach out to you guys because we were setting up a meeting with just P-Burg leaders saying, if we can't get patients on these vans, then we're just not going to bother going anymore. It's a matter of...
Where are you with your van in Phillipsburg?
We're in the public housing.
So you go to Housing Authority?
We go to Housing Authority.
Where are you specifically? Was it next to the Heckman House in that area
there?
Yep,
right, Heckman.
Right at parking lot there.
Okay.
We were across the street, like when you cross the street
Yeah, I know
between this, in that gravel area, so there's more visibility.
Yeah.
Housing wanted us sort of adjacent so that the seniors didn't have to cross the street, but now there's less visibility.
Yeah.
So now, like very few, and we're becoming more involved. Like we now have someone on the preschool advisory council. I placed a phone call out to a couple people out there that community leaders, but my feeling is that as long as it's just the van or the vans going, especially for medical, no one's going to want to go because what if they get sick on a day that the van's not there?
Right.
And we can't obviously be there every day of the week. So, and until we get a regular, like, full panel of people, the more people that come, the more will be there.
Right.
But if people don't come, then we're just not going to be there. So it's a matter of helping communities, getting together with leaders to say, let's get people seen if they need it. And if you're at shelters, we'll make a day for the shelter, day for the residents or the clients. We prefer to do it that way. But
Do you go to Hunterdon? Are you in Hunterdon or just
so
Sussex and Warren?
we'll go to Hunterdon, but honestly, there's been very little need. It's like all this back and forth. We've always found that the Hunterdon Medical Center there has met the need with their various clinics, and then like 8 months down the line, we'll hear like, no, there really is a need, and then we'll go again and see 3 patients, and it's really weird. They've told us kind of like their needs are met. But then again, now we're hearing it like there's a need and they're not being met.
What about the dental?
Dental's very active. Dental's active everywhere. But we're pushing integrated care, so medical dental is a priority for us. For sure.
Okay.
So I think that was my
Thank you.
Are you going to be, are you going to be coming back here with the van in the parking lot, or is that not going to go forward?
We have not been coming here in a very long time. And again, if there was a need, we would.
Yeah, I know.
It
is too far.
Is Hackettstown too far for you guys?
Well, primarily my clients are in Phillipsburg.
We go to Phillipsburg with the dental van. We have plenty of dates.
And if you let us know, that's something we can post in the waiting room.
posted.
Can they see it?
The issue of my last understanding is that we haven't been able to
we haven't been able to book the patients. And then they call me or I reach out to them or whatever, and they say, yeah, but then they don't show up. And unfortunately, that's been the issue. We haven't been able to book at least 10 people to come in, and that's the bottom line.
Well,
you and I talked about that.
Much better than medical.
Yeah.
But even then, we're sure. So if you guys have, please, I'd like to work with you so that, and refer you to the van manager. So if you have clients that need medical or dental, just say, listen, these are the 5 people I have. I'll send you the registration paperwork, or tell you when my person's down there, they can go to your location, register your clients, and get them appointments and get them seen.
Because medical seems to be a little bit more easy to schedule than dental. There's not, I don't feel there's already. They don't take Medicaid.
No.
They're not there anymore.
They're not there anymore.
Plainfield's not there.
No, there's nobody.
Right, but, right. And we want to be able to...
No, I think so. The other dental places.
Associates?
Associates take, yes, they take that. Yeah, that's
Oh,
up the
those
street, not the,
those-
but yeah, associates take, the Medicaid dental. Yeah. That's the only one that's in the P right there. That's it. Yeah, that's really, and then especially if it's oral, you know, if it's more complex, they have to go, you know, more further.
Yeah.
All right.
We'll be in touch. You guys have my information, or I'll give you? Okay.
Yeah,
So the last agenda item is too big for the rest of, you know, probably 5 minutes ago when we should have let you guys go. You've been very patient, so thank you. But I do want to put it on your brain so that the next thing that we do is be productive between now and the next time we get together about coordinated assessment, because we really need to figure out everything. Right? We need to figure out the structure, the policies that we're going to be operating this under. You know, there's a vacancy. Who's responsible for letting everybody know there's a vacancy so that we can make a prioritized placement? There's someone who we know needs to be assessed. When do I assess them? Should I assess them sooner if I know they're chronically homeless for 12 years and they just haven't stayed in my shelter for 6 months? You know, whatever it is. We need to organize around all of those things. And by we, I mean your input has to shape what our policies are going to be. So case managers, how many of the folks that come into your shelter or into your caseload or in your outreach are actually placed by themselves, and in what time frame, right? If they figure out their own situation, they just need a temporary help. And beyond that, you know, should we be assessing everyone who stays a certain period of time for the possibility of getting a permanent supportive housing voucher? If they're not literally homeless and they're not disabled, they're not eligible. So that's easy. We don't assess those folks who don't meet one of those two criteria. But we need to figure out all of those things. And so that's one thing. If you can be thinking about those logistics that impact you and your program and when and how you would be utilizing an assessment like this, think about the tool itself. So that's number 2, right? Both the form and what we have here on paper that you can take home. Does it meet our standards? Does it meet our standards of being as easy to use and implement as possible, right, for you all? Because you're the ones that are really going to need to be utilizing it. Does it meet our needs as a community to prioritize for these resources, right? Are we looking at the right things? Do we want to talk about that at all? Do we want to change anything slightly? Oh, this number doesn't make sense of income. This, you know, source shouldn't be prioritized. Is there anybody that's not integrated into the tool? Those are the 2 main things, but also any other feedback that you have that you think needs to be considered before and put into some format that we can discuss the next time we meet about this. That's the 3rd thing. Okay, so I think that the action steps, if it's cool with you, I think there's 2 action steps in terms of next meeting. Okay, we should have a next meeting like this where I don't talk. Like we're literally, I show up with a notepad and that's it. And you guys hash out what we think needs to happen. Maybe we have talking points of each different step that we need to discuss. Because, you know, I can do stuff and make tools that will help you, but I don't want to do it where it's not your CoC decision at the end of the day. Go ahead.
And there are a couple of truly basic questions. For example, a voucher opens up in Sussex County. My client is in Monarch County. They meet the priorities they're willing to move. The information that goes along with that, what transfers from Monarch County to Sussex County, what doesn't transfer, what has to be reopened, what are the time frames for that. There's a lot that's outside of that specific tool.
Exactly right. You're exactly right. You guys have an additional challenge to some communities that are already doing this in that you are regional and you have multiple centers of, you know, funding and things that are centered around different county governments. So the CoC transcends, but the reality is that how does that impact, you know, are we seeing a disproportionate impact on some providers in one county or some providers in another county, and how do we address that? Should we recognize that, guess what, the biggest center for chronic homelessness is along the river and it's near, you know, Phillipsburg and Warren County maybe, right? Well, if that's the case, you know, is everybody comfortable saying, as a Tri-County, we're reporting our PIT numbers in the same format? Everybody's impacted because it's increasing, you know, the cost of healthcare, the cost of other things in our CoC. Those are real questions, right? And the reality is that right now, the CoC resources that had been awarded were awarded predominantly to Warren and Sussex agencies prior to the merger. And so, but right now, what we're saying is we're not just going to allow agencies to be serving folks that are in that county. Right? So by the same token, even if we see that the reality is that there's more prioritized folks from one county or another, we're now really emphasizing the fact that all of our programs need to serve folks in all counties based on priority, not based on geography.
And do we need I hate to use the term point person because we need more work than somebody. But if we are within the continuum moving someone from Orange County to Sussex County, who in this office can be that contact person so that they can continue the level of treatment or case management, even if that person doesn't come in and apply for an exam, is that even practical?
Yeah. I mean, you know, I think it's probably at this stage we're not going to create a big, you know, administrative piece where it's like you have to go to someone in Sussex County in order to talk to that agency. Let's say it's Advanced Housing has an opening in one of their permanent supportive housing beds in Sussex County. Your guy is prioritized. Of everybody in the CoC, there's no reason in my mind why you can't call Advanced Housing and get that guy leased up. But we have to figure out what that is. And each agency that is going to be receiving referrals and giving referrals has to have that contact information, the understanding of what the process is. Because that agency is going to need documentation of homelessness, documentation of income, documentation of, you know, chronic disability, whatever it is.
Just brings something up on my mind. Also, if that guy who's #1 priority and meets all the criteria says, I don't want to move to Sussex County, he keeps his spot on the list. He does not.
I wrote that down. What happens when the person declines?
Or let's say it's an alternative bed or an advanced housing bed. They have to accept folks who have a severe persistent mental illness.
Right.
That's their target population. So if #1 on our list is someone who's a veteran who has a severe physical disabling condition,
right,
that person's not going to be eligible for that bed. So we have to keep them prioritized and try and figure out something else we can do, right, to help them. But the next prioritized person,
choice. They're not penalized because they don't accept.
And that's something that we have to wrap our minds around because we have a totally different way of looking at it.
Right. And this is the other thing too, right? We don't want our prioritization list to become an excuse to terminate GA right? We don't want you to say, hey, because the reality is if you're turning down any housing opportunity, you're getting cut, right? We have to figure out how to avoid that, hopefully.
You're not going to be able to.
Well, but what defines an opportunity for housing? Even if you're prioritized for something, it doesn't
There's a
mean
new regime at DFT, Nick. I'm not sure that the
I
reg is going
understand
to be
that, but
interpreted
as long
that
as
way.
they haven't changed the workforce regulations, it doesn't matter who's running it. Regulation's a regulation.
Yeah, do they have a mental illness that?
Well, I'm not saying that. I'm not going into that part. What I'm saying is that if, like, you had a voucher for somebody and you offered that voucher to the individual, provided the individual is of sound mind and not under the influence and doesn't lack the capacity to make a decision, they say no. They are to not receive further assistance.
See, but we don't have to phrase it that way.
I understand.
So if we have someone on our prioritization list, we have to. This is what we have to figure out. We have to get into that weed. You know, we have to get back there and figure out what our policies are going to be, so we prioritize the people who need it most, and hopefully don't penalize the people who need it most.
Well, my recommendation would be that somewhere along the line, somebody has to have a chat with DFT.
We are. We are. That was some last week.
But if there's a new wave coming.
In fact, they said to me last week, I don't know why there's this big issue with counties like, you know, they're a Warren County person, we're not taking them. It's the same eligibility across the state, so why is it any different what county you're in if you're homeless?
That's terrifying, Bob. Every county that has a major rescue mission is going to be PO'd.
The problem is that when the most affordable rents, as per Senator Cory Booker, are in Warren County, trust me, I have no place to put your people. Seriously, I really have no place to put your people.
People generally want to stay where they are anyway.
Usually do.
You know, if there's a behavioral health client who is very hard to engage, he or she is now engaged after X number of years, they're doing well, and they're in Sussex County, and there's a slot in Hunterdon County. To say to that person that they have to move down there where it might be total failure, I think it's just a bad outcome that we all have to be very mindful of.
Well, and this is the other thing, right? Let's say we have, let's say it's a DASAC voucher, right? And it's a victim of domestic violence who's prioritized on our list. DASAC is in Warren County, right? The reality is, if this person is prioritized and they're from Daisy, is Daisy willing to provide services and become the sponsor agency on that project? I mean, you know, if we can work together on figuring all of this stuff out, it's not easy. It's hard, and we would need to develop not just, hey, this is the way it's going to be. We would have to really develop memoranda of understanding among our agencies to map it out.
And you can't penalize the client if the voucher opens up in Hunterdon County and that's where the user is.
Right.
You know, and that's like the most basic ridiculousness, but it is the way you look at it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So if I've got, my funding for my shelter comes from the county, the majority of it. So if somebody from Warren County is referred to me, is Warren County going to pay my shelter costs out of county?
See, now that's above my pay grade. I have no idea. That's DFT.
That's not going to happen right
now.
No. So who's going to pay it? Because Sussex County's not going to pay it.
And right now we're not at that point. But right now we're not prioritizing for shelter beds, right? So right now we're not at that point. Technically, there are communities that are at that point, and it's mandated by HUD because they get ESG dollars that go to their shelters. If there's ESG money tangled up in this system, then it has to be using coordinated assessment. So people are prioritizing for shelter in Middlesex County. I think a couple others, at least one other.
But those are typically single county COCs that get a direct allocation of ESG dollars. None of our 3 counties get a direct.
And none of the dollars that are sent by the county to your shelter are ESG dollars. So right now there's no compulsion to prioritize for emergency shelters, but
that could change.
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, at some point, if we are deciding that we need to address what Josetta said in terms of like our prevention resources, let's say Hunterdon County's out of HPP, right? That's only a resource that's going to serve people in Hunterdon County, right? So there's no way we can transfer those types of things. But let's say Hunterdon County is spending its rapid rehousing dollars, and it's getting to the end of the year, and they've spent less than the other two, and we have someone who's eligible. CoC dollars transcend. So we can start talking about, hey, we got a household that's been homeless 6 months. If they had 6 months, they could be sustainable.
Do you already kind of do that, though?
We did our financial plan.
We've pretty much just split it 3 ways, and we've all used it.
Yeah.
I mean, this year the money.
Right now we're not at the stage of we need to have that conversation after we start working with this for our PSH. Start going to that rapid rehousing level, because it's technically not just, and I will guarantee you in 2018 DCA is going to ask you guys about this with your HPRP all of a sudden, because it's going to be a federal regulation that you have to use coordinated assessment for HPRP, because it's ESG funds. So we have to use that as well as the CoC funds in conjunction with our prioritization tools. So those are the types of things that we have to plan around and figure out how we're going to do it. If everybody stays in their lane, right, our county with our pot of money, and we're prioritizing within, our system, we can probably do that with our prioritization tool. We can run a report and then sort by county. You can do that. That's coordinated. That's assessing, and that's referring. That's meeting our HUD standard, right? We can work on those types of things, but we have to have the conversation about the policy and structure. It's not going to be easy. Just single examples. There's a lot of weeds. So you got to get back in and figure out and navigate. And there's always going to be, we don't want to make the perfect the enemy of the good. We want to try, and we want to work on it and see if we can't get this thing going so we can start placing people based on prioritization. But there's going to be a lot of reevaluation. Probably at every meeting that we have subsequent to starting, we're going to be, guess what, I found an exception. Guess what, I found the situation. Guess what, there's a crack over here or a gap that someone's falling through, and can we address it? And how do we address it? And what funding meets their need? And are we using our tool the right way? How are we getting people who aren't in HMIS? Are they being shortchanged? There's going to be all of that fit and start, but at the end of the day, you really have the chance to make things work. I think you're on the cusp of making it work in terms of meeting our statutory requirement, but also starting to maybe say, guess what, the people that are out there who have been living in the woods, who have resisted services, they're going to continue to be prioritized until they're housed based on our tool. I mean, so who's affirmatively furthering fair housing? Who's beating down their tent door, right, and saying, you're first on my list, I need to get you housed, and do we have the services to meet that need? If we don't have the services to house someone who's chronically homeless for a long time, we have to figure out how to get those resources. It's not going to be it's not going to be just, all right, he's number one, here's a lease. You guys know.
Another thing too is that I guess we can just discuss something to brainstorm is when people start out, they have the same number and they have the same type of disability. How who's going to be first person?
So on the last page, there is a on the last page there's a tie-break criteria that was developed. This is what Middlesex County uses for tie-break. Okay, it's just again going back to those basic things of the 2 fields that are length of time homeless and number of episodes. So if our basic criteria of whether our system is working or not is whether people are housed and how long they've been homeless, then we're going to prioritize based on the length of homelessness. So there's 2 24s, and they're our top scoring households. One's been homeless for 6 months, one's been homeless for 5. 6 months got it. That's it. I mean, there's it. And we can, and maybe one's ineligible for the voucher that's there because of the disability requirement or the type of house, whatever it is. It's not ADA accessible, and the person has a physical, whatever it is. There's all sorts of considerations that we're going to have to navigate, and sometimes by the seat of our pants. But hopefully, we develop, better and better policy every time we try to use this, so that there's fewer and fewer curveballs. Yeah.
Just wondering, this is just off the top of my head, looking at provider agencies, for example, the supportive housing programs that we have with DASAC, Family Promise, and TASC.
Yeah.
Warren County Housing is the grantee. We are the sponsors, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Are they?
Well, you're not the grantees, you're the sponsors. Right.
Yeah. Right. So as the grantee operating a Tri-County supportive housing program, are the public housing authorities in HMIS?
So here is the way that I have never seen the MOU between you and the Warren Housing Office for providing services for that, program. If there exists such an MOU, which there is a HUD requirement to do, but if there is such an MOU, it should designate the roles and responsibilities of each party. And I know communities where it's the housing authority that's doing soup to nuts in terms of intake and they're entering into HMIS, but that's very rare. Mostly it's the sponsor agency who is doing the annual, income update or helping them with the packet that they send back to the housing office, providing the services.
All they do is pay the rent.
Usually it's housing offices like to pay rent. They really like to pay rent. They're good at paying rent, and that's what they stick to. They don't really want to see people, 364 days a year if they're not coming in to get their income packet done. Right. So, yeah.
But one of the things I think we have to look at, and maybe this isn't the time to even bring this up or the place, but agencies such as Family Promise, DASAC, TASC, of course TASC is government, its pockets are very deep there. We are providing the supportive housing program to service our clients who, without this program, we would not have had a successful outcome. It wouldn't be a positive outcome.
And you're not getting
we took that program on to service Family Promise clients so that we could have a safe and successful exit for them. We took that on with absolutely no funds, no admin money whatsoever. So with the coordinated assessment, we already, I think, absorbed quite a bit without getting money, frankly.
Yeah.
And with coordinated assessment, if there's openings and we're taking in clients that we may be expected to track services, to provide services, and there's no admin money or funding, you're gonna laugh at the next part of this, there's no admin money or funding associated with them, who do we invoice?
I don't think it's funny. I think it's absolutely serious. I think that in other counties where they've done this, guess what happens? If you start using prioritization, guess who you get to house? The hardest guy in your county to house.
Who's going to require the most service. Right. And again,
specialized services for behavioral health or physical disabling conditions.
And these guys have heard me say this. It's not like we're all about the money, but we're trying to stay afloat and to keep our program operating.
It's not in any way a laughing matter. You're absolutely right. What it shows us is where we have gaps.
Right.
Guess what? That guy who's now prioritized, who may get or not get a placement in your, unit with his son because it's a family, that person has been homeless for a long time because they have been in the gap, right? So guess why there's a gap? We don't have the money designated to our providers to actually work in those intensive service environments for our clients, typically. Those folks that do have those resources, maybe the advances and the alternatives have more resources because they can bill Medicaid for certain services, right? But that's only limited, right? And they don't have all of our housing. Do we need to talk to them about maybe taking on some more sponsorships of these potential, participants? Maybe we need to sign an MOU between you and some of the other providers in our community saying, we have clients in this CoC program, can you accept our referrals for behavioral health or other types of treatment? Because we can't case manage people alone who are chronically homeless.
And it's a problem with HUD because even though the grantee might be the housing office, I mean, their admin is about $700. You know what I mean? It's not going to make or break anybody, that's for sure. And they
management.
Right, that's the issue. It's really who's paying for the services, and it used to be. So advanced housing is a good example because they have a CoC grant for permanent housing, but they also have a CoC grant for supportive services. So they're able to use those dollars for things that they can't bill Medicaid for. HUD is not funding those anymore. It's how they're only funding housing, really. The
bottom line is that you have, there's so many nails to hit on the head, but that's one of the major ones, is like, guess what? If we're starting to actually prioritize the people who need housing the most, we have to figure out how we're paying to serve and house and maintain housing for the people who need housing the most. And that's not the same as what we've been doing historically.
So we're still waiting to hear about the Medicaid waiver at the state level. It's with the feds, and it's still, I don't know what, who knows now. But built into the Medicaid waiver now is housing support services. So things like housing search, housing stabilization, counseling, all of those things are going to become Medicaid reimbursable services. The problem is that in order to bill for those, you have to be a Medicaid provider. So, yeah, the partnerships with Medicaid providers that will be able to subcontract with folks to bill for some of those services are a real possibility. And, you know, the reimbursement rates are fairly decent. So that's going to be the way to go, because the Medicaid providers that are billing for clinical services and, you know, other types of case management that are already allowed probably don't want to be doing those housing stabilization services, and probably don't want to be searching for apartments with people and doing budget counseling and all those kind of things that you're already doing with your clients. So if they can be the biller and, you know, and work out agreements with you. So, you know, we're anxious for that, because the state already got through the state. The state said, yes, we want this. Everybody's in agreement. Those are important services for our vulnerable populations, and, you know, we want to be able to pay for that. But it's just sitting somewhere in the federal government.
Right. And, you know, the thing is that this is the worst time in history to have this conversation, right? Because we're about to go off the Medicaid cliff potentially, but, you know, until it happens.
Carry on as though nothing
exactly. I mean, until we know, we don't know. Right now, the real reality is, Bob, in a best case or in a worst case scenario, there's a gap. It still doesn't compensate you fully. It still doesn't make those folks who are doing the nitty-gritty work made whole. As of, you know, even with a best case scenario, we're still talking about a gap.
But at least there's some glimmer of hope maybe on it, right?
Right. The only thing is that what we can do is we can make the case better, saying exactly that we now know exactly what the need is, you know? Because when we've ignored those folks who may have needed to be prioritized, who have been living in the woods or, you know, been unsheltered for a long period of time, it's been a market failure that we haven't actually addressed or identified. And if all of a sudden we have providers that are looking down the barrel of serving the hardest to serve that haven't before, or in a way they haven't before, then we'll have a very specific list of people that we can say we need services to provide to this person, this person, this person, this person, and who's going to do it, and how are we going to pay for it? Because it gives us a very easy way to look at our need. It doesn't make it easy to solve the problem. It makes it easier to identify what the ask is of our fill-in-the-blank state, freeholder, private funder, you know, Warren Buffett, whatever, right? So anyway, that's all I had to say. Thank you for your patience. I know it's been, oh, don't read my email.
And thanks for dealing with the really hot room. I don't know why it's really hot, but it is.
70 degrees outside.
Because it's such a hot topic.
Our next Tri-County big meeting is April 5th at 1 o'clock. And then the next subcommittee for this will be May 3rd at 1 o'clock. And that's it. So you'll see emails from me regarding this. If anyone has any questions, please don't hesitate to ask me or Jay.
And that's our next scheduled meeting. If we send out materials from this meeting, I would suggest we try to do something again sooner, especially maybe something along the lines of what Domenica said, making me available to go through a training. You know, you can use my training module, you can do a form, we can figure out what the technical difficulties or understanding may be, and we can work through that see if that helps you guys in your consideration of whether the form meets your standards. So we'll workshop that, and the sooner we figure out whether it's going to work, the better we can make it sooner, or something. But thank you. I know that it was a long meeting, especially for those of you who were here at noon. So thank you.
How you doing, Sarah?
Good. How about you?
I'm good.
Tomorrow.
You come now?
Thanks,
If you have
Jay.
complaints, you're in the minority.
Nick comes out of his office.
For a little while. Amen, sister. All right.
Until next time.
You want to, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, there it is.
Oh, it was warm. It's super hot.
Folks on the phone, thanks for letting you go. Have a great day. No, there's still people there.
Do you want me to do anything here,
Press
Jay?
the red.